Good morning, all. I request the chairs of the session, Professor Sudipto Mandal and Dr. Ashok Lahari, and the speakers of the day, Professor C.P. Chandrasekhar, Dr. Deprasad Rath, Professor Surjit Majumdar, Dr. Dennis Rajkumar, and Professor Alvin Prakash to take the chairs on the dais. A very warm welcome to the first plenary session of the International Conference on Rethinking Public Finance for Emerging Development Challenges, jointly organized by Gulati Institute of Finance and Taxation and Madras School of Economics. This session, titled The State of State Government Finances in India, Persisting Issues and Future Directions, holds special significance as we gather here to reflect upon and engage in discussions on the pressing challenges of state finances in India. This session aims to provide valuable insights into the structural constraints that limit the fiscal autonomy of the states, including right expenditure commitments and borrowing constraints, and the evolving nature of fiscal federal relations in the country. Through these deliberations, we hope to facilitate a meaningful dialogue that can contribute to strengthening the fiscal resilience of state governments. I am confident that perspectives shared today will pave the way for insightful takeaways and actionable recommendations. It's my honor to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished chairs, Professor Sudipto Mandal, member of the 14th Finance Commission, and Dr. Ashok Lahari, member of 15th Finance Commission. We are privileged to have your esteemed presence guiding this session for leading the critical discourse. We are also honored to have an esteemed panel of speakers. I warmly welcome Professor C.P. Chandrasekhar, Emeritus Professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University, Dr. Deprasad Rath, former Principal Advisor at Department of Economic and Policy Research, Reserve Bank of India, Professor Surjit Majumdar, Professor at Center for Economic Studies and Planning, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Dr. Dennis Rajkumar, Director of the EPW Foundation, Professor Alvin Prakash, Chairman of the 5th State Finance Commission of Kerala. We are truly grateful to have such distinguished scholars and experts with us today. Your insights will be undoubtedly enrich our discussion and offer valuable perspectives of challenges of India. Finally, I extend a heartfelt welcome to all distinguished professors, scholars, students, and participants who have gathered here today to engage in this important session. Let me just outline the guidelines first. We have two chairs for this plenary session. The first chair, Professor Sudipto Mandal, will introduce the speakers, and the second chair, Dr. Ashok Lahiri, will facilitate the concluding session. Before I hand over the session to the first chair, let me just briefly give you the broad guidelines about the session. The first chair will introduce the topic, and the second chair will facilitate the concluding session. Each chair will have 5 minutes. Speakers of the session may kindly take 8 to 10 minutes. The discussion initiator may kindly encapsulate the points and may take 6 to 8 minutes for that, after which you can open the floor for discussion. We request all of you to adhere the time for the smooth conduct of the session. With that, I once again extend a warm welcome to you all and invite the chair of the session to formally commence the proceedings. Thank you.
So, a very warm welcome to all of you to this first plenary session of this very timely conference. It's wonderful to see so many old friends and colleagues in the group. I think it's a measure of particularly Joseph's convening power that he has brought us all together. Uh, it's interesting that this conference is being jointly organized by GIFT and the Madras School of Economics. So this joint collaboration has been extended down to the sessions also, and each plenary session has two chairs. In this case, was Ashok Lahiri and myself. So as she mentioned, the, we also worked out division of labor. I'll sort of take the. He wants to have the last word, so I'll speak first, say a few things, and especially later on, our main job is to be timekeepers. We want to make sure that we are on time. Otherwise, it's very disrespectful to other people who will have to come in later sessions and the lunch time and so on. So we will mind the time, and I'll take a few minutes now. After that, I won't come back. Uh, Professor Lahiri will take charge after that, the speaker, then discussant, and then his own last few words. Uh, as was mentioned, you have 10 minutes, the speakers, the panelists. Uh, so I would request that around 8 minutes, if somebody keeping the time, at 8 minutes, please ring a bell so that the speaker knows that he has another couple of minutes. There's no she, unfortunately, but 2 minutes, and then the panel will wind up. So, just very few comments for my few minutes that I have. Uh, you know, much of the focus on the discourse that has been going on fiscal federalism, and you heard a lot of that yesterday also, has been on the relationship between the center and the states taken collectively, or what we refer to as the vertical imbalance. And there's good reason for that, because despite what successive finance commissions have been saying, and the last one said 41% should be devolved. And this was not very different from the previous one, which had said 42, but that was because of JNK at that time being one of the states, then it became union territory. But effectively, as was mentioned yesterday by Mr. Chandrasekhar and many others, what is actually being transferred is much less. And there are various devices that the central government has been using. And to be fair, it's not just this government. There's always been the case that the central government always tries to reduce what is actually devolved rather than trying to uh, enhance that, as somebody was suggesting yesterday, that would be in the interest of the country also. Anyhow, that being the situation, this has been dominant in the discourse. Uh, as a result, the states are all taken together, but the states are not similar at all. There are huge variations among the states, and I hope this session we will focus a little bit on these variations across different states. Just to take an example, if you divide up your states into four categories: states which are good on the economic development side but weak on the social development side, states with the opposite: social development strong, economic development weak, and then states which are balanced, what I call balanced development, strong on both, and those that are weak on both. So in this four type classification, you have some states, and I'm just reading out from a recent paper we have done. States like Haryana, Karnataka, and Telangana, very strong on the economic performance side, but lagging behind, by which I mean lower than the median level in terms of their social development. And then you have the reverse. You have three states I've got here noted down: Odisha, Punjab, and West Bengal, which are very good on social development. In fact, the allocations for social level are also very high. But when you look at their economic performance, then that is below par. Then the good news is that we have as many as 7 states, and that includes Kerala, which are actually very balanced, doing pretty well on both sides. But unfortunately, there are also 8 states which are doing pretty badly on both sides. So the priorities for these states and what they need to focus on are very different, and I hope that that will be part of the discussion we have in this session. Uh, the other point I wanted to make, and again, the discourse has been dominated by center versus states at the state level. Very little discussion on what goes on in at the lower level below the state government. There's been some discussion of the need to build capacity and resource empower lower level institutions like local urban local bodies and panchayati raj institutions. But we need much more of that because it's those local bodies which are really the interface with civil society. We as individuals encounter government mainly in those local bodies, whether in rural or urban areas, and they need to be empowered, but everybody agrees that they really don't have the capacity and so on. And this, of course, is the domain of the state finance commissions, and we have a speaker who is chairing one of those commissions. Uh, the third point I want to make, and this is the last one, after this I'll stop, is about a certain tension between the principle of subsidiarity and externalities. When you have spillovers in certain activities or policies that go across state boundaries, then you need to centralize. And that is in conflict with the principle of subsidiarity, where you push down the level of decision making to the lowest level covering a certain jurisdiction and the citizens who partake of the services delivered in that. So, finding a right balance rather than just saying that we must have more decentralization, as many people do, or that we must have more centralization, seems to me it needs a rethink to look for a balanced path. So, with that, I'm going to stop and I'm going to request Chandrasekhar, the first speaker, to address us. Thank you.
No, I don't need that. Thank you, and um, morning to all of you all. Um, since there's only 10 minutes, I'm not going to use the presentation, but I'm just using my notes, so bear with me. It's difficult for me in 10 minutes in front of an audience like this on a topic on which most people here have spent a significant part, not a large part of their lives, analyzing them, to add much by way of knowledge to what they've contributed over the years. And I'm sure a lot of that is going to be reflected in the discussion which is going to happen, which happened yesterday and which is going to happen over today in the next 2 days. What I want to do is to really take off from the title of this session, which is The State of State Government Finances in India, Persisting Issues and Future Directions. Uh, I really want to ask the question, which of course all of us have in different ways asked at different points of time, is that are we really speaking of persistence, or are we talking about significant change over a period of time? Changes which are not merely linked to the question of competition of resources and the question, therefore, of the vertical devolution and the horizontal sharing of these resources, but really questions which are to do with the way in which center state fiscal relationships are embedded in the social and the economic environment in which we operate, the changes in economic policy regimes, and the consequences that has had for the nature of devolution over a period of time. Now, I think this is important because posing the issue as just the state of state finances tends to sort of push the discussion in the direction of asking how fiscally responsible are states. Whereas perhaps what we should be asking, and increasingly that's becoming, I think, the principal issue, that what really constrains financing for development at the state level. And we do know that the Constitution essentially thought that inevitably the developmental responsibilities of the states are in excess of their ability to efficiently raise resources, and therefore we need a situation in which while the center has a significant taxing capacity sort of allocated to it, that there must be a mechanism by which those resources can be devolved to the state such that they can meet their development responsibilities. So the question is, what constrains their financing for development, their ability to finance development? And here the real issue is a sort of long-standing difficulties faced by the states intensifying over a period of time to mobilize adequate resources, either directly or through the process of devolution from the center to the states. And therefore, we are in a situation where, if you actually look at it now, I think something like 20 out of 30 states and union territories are are recording fiscal deficits, which is well above, well, whatever the 3.5% of GDP. So this is not just a question of one rogue state or another. This is really a question of there being some structural problem as far as the ability of states to mobilize these resources is concerned. Now, uh, when I said that what we need to look at is changes over a period of time. These changes, which I'm talking, which I'd like to sort of quickly sort of place before you, are not necessarily purely sequential. There's a significant degree of overlap intertemporally, but there have been changes which have affected, I think, the way in which the center state um, uh, sort of fiscal relations have evolved over a period of time. Initially, the whole idea, because the whole idea of this devolution we know is based on a couple of presumptions. One, of course, is the presumption that it leaves out or separates the question of how much of the national surplus should be mobilized by the state in general, whether the central level or the state level. That is, you're taking away the question of how much of the actual economic surplus, I mean, how much of the potential economic surplus you're actually going to mobilize in terms of resources with the state, and separating that question on how exactly are we going to share whatever resources are mobilized in the aggregate between the center and the states and across the states. So that's the first presumption, that we can make this distinction between the two. And then you're saying that the competition between center and states can be partly addressed by what is presumed to be necessarily independent finance commissions, independent finance commissions, despite the way in which finance commissions get constituted. And finally, that you know discretionary transfers of some kind through plan grants and so on, through discussions at the NDC and Planning Commission when they existed, would be able to sort of accommodate the requirements of the state and give them voice, as it were, in this process. So this seemed to initially this seemed to work. It worked to a certain degree. There were, of course, there was contestation. States over a period of time were less and less happy, despite the fact that we know that by the time we got to the 14th Finance Commission, there was a significant increase in, numerically speaking. Of course, part of that is because of what happened to plan and revenue division. But leaving out that, we actually know that there seemed to be, numerically speaking, an increase in the amount of devolved resources. But despite that, there was a certain degree of contestation. But as I said, it somehow seemed, it seemed to sort of work. This really changed, I think, in a significant way when we began to see a change in policy regime, in particular after the middle of the 1980s and, of course, then the 1990s onwards. That 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 if you take a combination of what these in a fiscal sense these reforms meant, it was a commitment to reduce taxes on trade as a means to liberalizing. Remember, there's a separation between how much you mobilize and the sharing of these resources. So you're basically saying taxes on trade has to be reduced. Of course, India reduced it less than many other countries, but is now still going down that path. An emphasis on providing direct tax incentives because you wanted to incentivize private investment, a rationalization and simplification ostensibly of the indirect tax structure, leading up finally to the GST, and restrictions on debt finance government spending. I mean, that was the combination of things and many others which constituted the sort of idea of fiscal reform, which came as part of neoliberal reform. So we're really talking about a completely changed scenario in which once again we are looking at what exactly is the problem of the center state sharing of resources. And the big shift, of course, was the shift to the GST. The whole idea was that this was presented as some kind of a game-changing shift, which is actually going to give you some kind of whatever 14% increases every year in the total amount of subsumed taxes, and the states were persuaded to cede their taxing rights uh, in the name of whatever one country, one tax, or whatever it may be. That you ceded your taxing rights because you're persuaded for two reasons. One, because of the argument that this is not only not going to be just revenue neutral, but actually be revenue enhancing. And that was what was presented at the time when GST was being pushed. And the other, that you're really going to be in a situation where there would be a period of adjustment when maybe this is not realized. But during that period of time, in any case, you're going to be compensated for any shortfall relative to that 14% increase. So you're persuaded in this double sense. You're basically, they shouldn't have got persuaded, but you were persuaded in this double sense that you give up, you cede your taxation rights, and when you cede a large part of your taxation rights, you're going to do it because of the fact that you have this efficient regime which is going to increase the volume of taxes, and you're going to have a situation in which, if there is a period in which this does not happen, you will be compensated. Because we know that period ended, still the growth in revenues hasn't kept up to the 14% promise, and despite the fact that you don't have compensation. Is that the well? Is it-
We have 2 minutes.
in 2 minutes, 2 minutes, okay. So you're basically, once you have that kind of a perception of what exactly, I mean, the direction in which you should move, then then you are caught in a situation, we know, where not only are the revenues which you're getting not adequate because of the fact that there's significant centralization, all the discussion about cesses and surcharges and so on. Not only is there a situation in which the center increasingly relies on peculiar sources of receipts, not merely miscellaneous capital receipts in the form of privatization, but also in particular this large transfer of surpluses, whatever that might be, of the Reserve Bank of India, of the central bank, to, to the budget of the government. So we are against monetizing the deficit, but you're actually promoting a situation in which there is implicitly a 0% borrowing from the central bank, because you decide arbitrarily that so much is going to be transferred to the center. It's like picking up your phone and saying that, listen, I'm sending so many treasury bills to you. Please transfer so much money into my account, which is what monetization was about. Here, we are supposedly in a world of reform where you don't monetize, but you have this arbitrary shift of a significant amount of resources, of which, of course, the states don't get any share. So if you're in a context of that kind, obviously your pressure is going to increase, and that pressure is going to increase even more because of the fact that there's this stringent restriction on your ability to borrow, and that restriction, we know, has actually been carried to an extent whereby even if you have special purpose vehicles set up for this purpose, so long as there's any connection with the budget, you will end up having to include that borrowing into the total, and that gets limited, as happened in the case of Kerala. Finally, I think there is a third phase we're going in, and end with that. And that third phase is that this framework, which has evolved over a period of time, has resulted in a situation where the states have become significantly dependent upon central sector schemes of different kinds. And there is not merely not merely a tendency for the centralization of resources, but there is a weaponizing. There is a weaponizing of the ability of states to undertake certain programs, not merely in terms of how much they get in what kind of programs, but also that these programs have to take on a particular color. And they have to take on a particular color and be attributed quite obviously and sharply to the center, to say that, therefore, any legitimacy which you can gain from your development practice is now not going to be gained by you, because it's not going to be attributed to you. It has to be attributed to the center. So you use this transformed framework to weaponizing. To weaponizing the to actually create a situation where you use it, what is essentially for political ends. And the crudest or starkest form this takes is this notion of the double engine sarkar, which is actually a statement that it's necessary for you to actually elect a government which is similar to that led by the party in power in the center, because then you're openly stating that you're going to get more money, you're going to get more schemes in different forms, and therefore you would be in a position in which you'd get benefit as a state, but so long as that benefit does not legitimize a state government which is actually being run by a different political party. So we are really talking about a completely transformed situation, a transformed situation which comes because of the changed economic environment, but more importantly, which comes because of a change in the manner of functioning of political democracy in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dr. Yes, that's
So thank you. Uh, well behaved. Let me go to the graph here. If you take the gross fiscal deficit from 2000 2001 onwards, you see that the minimum we had achieved was 1.6% in 7/8, and the max was 4.4% in 3/4. After that, if you look at the post-COVID years, from 2021, that high of 4.1, now it has become quite range bound. And of course, there is a minor blip now in 24-25. Look at the debt, and this heat graph this side would say that how differentiated the state the debt story is, which Professor Mandal was mentioning. And if you look at the debt GDP ratio, the last column number 4, here you would find that from 21, that is 31%, it has really come down, although in a narrow margin, narrow margin, and it is remaining quite well behaved. So as different authorities have said, and also the academia has said, that you have this NCR paper recently, debt sustainability is not the issue, and there are reasons for that. And it is not a monotonically increasing number. You see that it is taking this, it increases, then comes down, then increases during the crisis period, it comes down. That's how the fiscal policy, the fiscal indicators are supposed to behave. It is not a monotonically increasing non-stationary series. Now, let me pick up 3 or 4 comments on which, this state finance report of the last December 24 release has given little stories about, what are the underlying changes happening in the parameters, some of the important parameters. And let me pick up first this capital outlay as a variable, and then, of course, I'll go to the parameters. Now, if you take this interest-free loan scheme, that is the middle line, the pre-scheme and the post-scheme, you see the capital outlay has really gone up. And the numbers are, when it started with 11,000 to 15,000 crore in the initial 2 years. And then now it is 10955 crores in 23-24. And the share of these loans in total capital outlay of states over the period, 22-23 to 23-24, varied between 3.9% in Orissa to 50.6% in Andhra Pradesh. Again, that heterogeneous story which is coming up here. But there is a level shift. If you take the COVID year, there is a level shift in the capital outlay, which is a good thing. We did some research on what really determines the capital outlay, and this big table there, I will just summarize. It says, if you look at the you know POG, positive output gap, negative output gap, and that columns there, you would see that there is certain amount of counter cyclicity which you find in the capital outlay by the state governments, which is a good thing. Second thing is, to what extent that, because there is so much of indebtedness that we are talking about, how that impinges, what is the implication of that on the state's capital outlay. And that, what we did, we took the whole panel of states and did a dummy at the 25% level. And you would see that when the debt level is less than 25%, there is a positive impact on the capital outlay. And when it exceeds 25%, it is really bad. It is really negative, which is a point to be taken. So states need to balancing the requirement for higher capital outlay with the goal of keeping overall debt levels low and sustainable. So the second point, now I come to the, the changes, the changes in the parameters, some of the important parameters. If you look at the average buoyancy of own tax revenue of states, it has really increased. If you see the left-hand side graph, see the pre-COVID period, it used to be 0.86, now it is 1.44, and it is maintaining, it is sustaining at that level, which is again a good sign. Now, there is so much of discussion about GST, but the fiscal team has done some work here. What they have done is they have done the Gini coefficient and the coefficient of variation, 3 years moving average. It says that after 17-18, after that GST year, what is happening is that states with a history of low tax GSTP ratio have witnessed considerable improvement in revenue mobilization, and that leads to a reduction in interstate disparity in tax collection. So that is very clear in both these statistical measures. And of course, they have done another panel regression, which you can see. It's a box item in this last fiscal report. What about fiscal multipliers? There are there are a lot of estimates available here, including by Professor Bhanumurthy. Our team has done that updated assessment, and what we see is that the revenue expenditure impact multiplier is 1.43, which is understood because the impact is just for 1 year. But when you go to the capital outlay, it is 2.77, with a peak multiplier cumulated is 3.84 over 3, more than around 3 to 5 years, as it has been said. So if these multipliers are at work, that is again a good development. Yeah. Now, quality of expenditure is another theme that we have worked in our report as well as in our publications, and we have taken the revenue expenditure capital outlay ratio. And what we see is that we have plotted the state-wise reco ratios. You see that these are the states, but at the aggregate level, there has been a welcome decline from 6.3% to 5.2% in the last 3 years. That is there in this graph also. And what we did, we were trying to see, given our mix of reco ratio and several other control variables with the growth, the GDP per capita, what we saw is that when the ratio is between 6 to 7.5%, it really is associated with the maximum growth rate. And what we see is that the reco ratio is at multi-year low, particularly in the recent period since 10, 11 or so. And then it has, from double digit, it has come down and it is staying there, which is again a good sign. Way forward, let me complete now quickly. Uh, the disciplining mechanism is at work, but there is a lot that needs to be done. Persistently high debt level, contingent liability, rising subsidy burden emphasize the need for further fiscal prudence while prioritizing growth enhancing capital spending. A durable fiscal consolidation must mark the way forward. That has been stated in this year's report. And there, what it has been said is that these reforms that, we have expenditure reforms, tax reforms, finally, we should have this, what is called next generation fiscal rules should be in place. And there are papers from IMF on that, where they say there should be flexibility clauses, there should be crisis mitigation mechanisms, there should be one-time correction modes and all that. If you are interested, you can see. And that is the need of the hour when we are talking about the next generation fiscal rules rather than rigid mechanistic, numbers that we have till now. SFCs are very important, role of state finance commissions, because for the, tier 3 and the lower level of government, we require the devolution of funds in time. And on the data front, availability of quarterly fiscal data of states assumes great significance. We do not have that. We have yearly now, and that will really, enable a lot of further work in these areas. With that, I will close my remark. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity to speak to this wonderful audience. Thank you so much.
It's one of the this one, second one, second one. Yeah, just make it full screen. Do you want to use this canvas? I can change it from here. Yeah. Which way move the arrow? Leave the right arrow. This one. Okay. Very good morning to everyone here. And thanks to Professor Joseph and Professor Bhanamurthy for the invitation to come and speak here, especially because it is in the midst of, in the presence of so many luminaries in the field from which, like my previous speaker, I've also learned tremendously over the years. So my presentation is basically, and I will have to rush through the slides because of the time constraint, is essentially about not about state finances per se, but the implications for the state financial situations that are emanating from the central government's fiscal stance and its macro policy, macroeconomic implications. So, since the FRBM Act was enacted in notified in 2004, much of the period since then, the fiscal policy has been dominated by trying to retreat from something. Some retreat from first the fiscal stimulus following the 2008 crisis, and then again that has been called a fiscal stimulus during the COVID crisis. So I'm not sure it's appropriate to call what happened in 2021 a fiscal stimulus when you've administratively shut down significant part of the economy. You can't be giving us a stimulus at that point of time. But essentially, what happens to the deficit in these two episodes, trying to retreat from that. Much of the time has been spent in this. And the similarities can be seen in 2010, 11, and 11, 12, when the central government and a different government from the present one was presenting the budget, what they had to say. I'm not sure people have the time to go through the whole thing, but you can see that it's a retreat from the stimulus that is being announced as something that the government is going to embark on. Exactly the same thing is seen in response to what happened after COVID. Immediately after that, you retreat to the path of fiscal consolidation. So that's been the dominant feature of this particular period. What has also been a feature of this period, and I think a lack of full appreciation of the fact of what's happened on the revenue front. That so if you look at the period in which the fiscal deficit to GDP ratio came down sharply in the period before 2008, that was mainly on account of a very sharp increase in the central taxes to GDP ratio. But since then, it has struggled to get back to that level. So over a 15-year period, we've not been able to return to that. State governments' final taxes have actually done relatively better compared to the 2007-8 level. The implications of this for state finances are, of course, one flow from the fact that part of the state's finances come from their share in central taxes. And that problem is compounded by the various tricks being used to reduce the part that goes to the states. The second implication comes from if this is the central government's revenue position, then it has implications for the expenditure. It means that the bulk of the burden of adjustment or consolidation is placed on the expenditure side. And those expenditures which contribute to the resources available to the states, they also become victims of that expenditure compression. And the third is the implication of such a fiscal stance for the macroeconomy and for the nature and level of economic activity, which has feedback effects on both central as well as state tax revenues. Now, if you look at this period, sorry, this is the wrong title. This is basically showing you that if you look at the period up to 2007-8, that brief period in which the central tax to GDP ratio went up, most significant contributor to that was actually corporate tax. Okay, with a little bit all coming from, and this is the only period post 1991 in which there is any level change in India's tax to GDP ratio. So we have struggled to return to that level even the combined figure in that period. Whereas that process stops after 2007-8 of corporate tax to GDP ratio actually increasing. So this is reflecting something about the underlying growth process of the economy, where the corporate sector is both growing very fast as well as faster than the rest of the economy. It's also reflecting very rapid rise in the share of corporate profits in national income, because of which you get this particular trend. And that's, of course, accompanied by very rapid growth of corporate investment in that particular period. If you look at the period of fiscal consolidation once you retreat from the stimulus, virtually nothing is happening on the review front except taking advantage of the decline in international prices after 2014 to raise the oil taxes. That's the only major thing. So the burden here again, you see the POL taxes. They are the ones that actually go up. If you exclude them, nothing is happening as far as the central taxes are concerned over an entire decade before the COVID pandemic. And therefore, it's the expenditure which has to bear that particular burden of adjustment. Exactly the same thing is happening in the post-COVID consolidation process. So revenues have recovered, and what is basically happening is that expenditure growth is being held back. So by now, you are in a position where, relative to 2019-20, the increase in revenues percentage terms is greater than the increase in expenditure. So it's again the expenditure side which is bearing that burden of adjustment. Now, if you look at this particular period, if you look at the recovery of revenues, here again it is different. So first, during the COVID period, again, it was oil taxes, which was used by the central government to protect its financial situation, not shared with the states because it was cesses were used. States bore the burden of the drop in tax revenue. Center protected itself. But after that, it's been mainly personal income taxes that have grown. Again, saying something about the underlying trend in the economy, that this is not related really to growth of economic activity, but related to something that is happening about distribution is concerned, because most of these personal income taxes are coming from an exceptionally small section of the population. Though a very large number of people are filing income tax returns, barely 26 lakhs people account from income tax data. 26 lakh people account for 66% of personal income tax liability. So it's a very small stratum's income that is being reflected here, not the taxes which we would expect to move up in relation to economic activity. So now all of this, of course, the justification for all this fiscal consolidation process is supposed to be that it is supposed to create appropriate conditions for private investment. Right? The brief period of rise in the India's investment ratio before 2008, driven by corporate investment, came to an end in 2008. And years of attempting fiscal consolidation has not managed to revive that. So it's a different kind of growth process that is happening, and the implications of this are being felt in the form of what the fiscal situation is. And if you look at not just investment in general, if you look at the more recent period and look at specifically investment in or capital formation in machinery and equipment, which is what is the investment that you'd expect, which would create durable kind of basis for economic activity as opposed to just putting up buildings, construction activity, or expenditure on software. It's virtually, this is a horrendous picture that you see across all institutional sectors, virtual stagnation in real capital formation in machinery and equipment. Accompanied, of course, also by a situation where capital goods are becoming cheaper relative to food, and therefore capital is becoming cheaper relative to labor. So there's employment implications also. So if this is the macroeconomic impact of the fiscal stance, this is also then something that is coming and affecting the situation as far as the central as well as state finances are concerned. Now, as far as capital expenditures are concerned, of course, there is an argument that the center's shift from revenue to capital expenditures in recent times, at least that adds a stimulating impact on the economy, even if the total expenditure is not. But if you take both the center's expenditure as well as the investments out of resources of public enterprises, you find that there's actually nothing. And if you look at public investment to GDP ratio from national account statistics, total public investment, it's in fact slightly lower now than it used to be earlier. So in the name of stimulating a private investment-led growth process, you are pursuing a fiscal stance whose actual impact, macroeconomic impact, may be the opposite. And you are then stuck in that loop where the central finances, central revenues are always under pressure, state revenues are under pressure. And your response, if you remain confined to that approach that you have to get back to that fiscal deficit ratio which you had in 2007-8, its implication is that you are continuously chasing an objective, not necessarily ever achieving it. In the process, center as well as state finances are continuously under strain. Thank you. Just one final point I wanted to make here, which is one of the implications of this in terms of what's happening to employment and all. And this has something to do with the politics of fiscal policy also nowadays, which is that if you look at per capita revenues of the central and state governments, they are lagging behind what's happening to per capita income. But labor incomes, proxied here by ASI wage per worker, are lagging behind. So the government as a whole is becoming poorer relative to the rich, becoming slightly richer relative to the poor. And the implications of this economic trend is that the pressures, political pressures to do something to help people sustain are also increasing. And that is one of the ways in which both central and state governments also face this problem of fiscal strain, that the need to earmark certain resources, which is simply about supporting people in great economic distress. And that's adding to the strains that both, and this is particularly perhaps being felt at the state government level more than at the central government. But this is the way in which you politically seek to manage this crisis. That's why I termed it both a fiscal as well as a microeconomic crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Um, Friends, let me begin my talk by thanking the sorry. Hmm? Okay. Let it. Let me begin my talk by thanking the organizers of this international conference for inviting me to speak in this plenary session. I will structure my talk around that theme only, that is persisting issues and future directions. Now, persisting issues, Dr. Rath, in his speech, he highlighted the benefits of RBI's publication, State Finances, which is basically compilation of data from the state budgets. Lately, what they are doing is, since they see a lot of deviation between their revised estimates and accounts, they also derive data based on the publication of CAG and provide one additional column called as provisional accounts. Now, if we go by the latest report, which Dr. Rath was talking about, what the fair assessment based on the pictures presented in the report is that there has been commendable progress across the states towards fiscal consolidation. Now, this a number of indicators have been used in their analytical chapter. And if you consider one of the indicators, that is gross fiscal deficit to GDP, I'm talking about combined states gross fiscal deficit to GDP, you will find that according to the provisional estimates, where the deviation between PA and accounts is minimum, it is 2.9%. for the year 2023-24, but it is budgeted to be slightly higher than 3%. Now, why this more than 3% is very important? That's because ever since the states began to adopt fiscal responsibility legislation starting from 2005, subsequent to FRBM Act of 2003, you'll find that the entire state public finance management is driven towards a kind of rule-based system. Now, what are the rules? We have the rules for fiscal deficit. We have rules for what should be the debt in relation to the GSTP, that is considering the debt sustainability. Then indirectly, since we have certain rules for gross fiscal deficit, we also need to follow certain rules towards mobilizing revenue as well as controlling the expenditure. So it covers the entire gamut of public finance, revenue, expenditure, as well as the borrowing behavior of the states. Now, as I said, when we see the Reserve Bank's latest publication, we see that it is fiscal consolidation is something that the states have, by and large, have achieved. Um, now, this is based on the averages. When we know that there will be a lot of interstate variations. So what I have done is I have considered certain benchmarks to understand the interstate variations and see how significant the states are in the whole economy in so far as having some numbers which deviates from the average. For instance, if you pick the number of states that have gross fiscal deficit as percentage of GSTP more than the national average, it is about 17 out of 31 states. And how significant these 17 uh, I mean, many of them are smaller, but it also has larger number of states, and these states account for 66% of the population, almost two-thirds of the population, as well as they have more than a half share in the GSTP. Now, take revenue deficit to fiscal deficit. This is a very important measure because it tells you how much of the revenue you have for productive expenditure. If you consider this, and if you see the number of states which has more, lesser, low ratio is better. So the states which have higher ratio than the average, they are about 12 states, but they account for 53% of the GSTP of all the states and 51% of the population. Now, Reco, he was talking about, and one major phenomena that we observe when we look at the state finances across the state is there is a kind of uptick in the capital outlay in relation to revenue expenditure. Generally, capital outlay, higher the capital outlay, it is always better. But then revenue expenditure is something a lot of states cannot avoid because it has got committed expenditure component. With the RECO, if you take, we normally say that this lower the ratio, it's better. And therefore, if you consider what is the average of all the states is 5.5, and number of states which has got higher than this. So that means, right, their spending, their ability to spend on capital outlay is somewhat lesser. You'll find that these states which have got higher RECO ratio, they are constituting 58% of the GSTP and they constitute about 54%. Likewise, when I take several indicators, I find that these states which have deviated from the average has been worked out by taking the, let's say, the combined gross fiscal deficit in relation to GDP. But when we see it, the gross fiscal deficit in relation to the respective states' GSTP, then we find somewhat a different picture. And these states now who are out of line from the averages, that is, if you apply rule-based system, then they are not following the rules. If you are considering these states, right, they are constituting on an average, when I looked at across several indicators, they constitute more than 55% of the GSTP in 2020 to 23. And in several indicators, they constitute nearly two-thirds of the population. So that means we are talking about a substantial chunk of number of states whose the fiscal management is somewhat not still adhering to the what we call as a rule-based kind of system, which we are seeing evolving during the last 2 decades. Now, what are these states? And there's a general pattern also I'm observing. Now, states, right? These are the states which we normally consider as larger as well as developed. Now, why we consider them as developed? Because you use the average per capita income and see whoever has got more than this average, you consider them as developed. If you use this kind of formula, then we find that states like Andhra Pradesh, Haryana, Kerala, Punjab, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, and of course West Bengal consistently remain off the mark. And states like MP, right, UP and Uttarakhand also show in most of the cases. Many of NES, that is northeastern states, they also rank this, which means what are the states there that actually present themselves following the rules? Basically, I can count Gujarat as one and Maharashtra to a larger extent. Now, the question is, these states which are not following the rules, whereas the states which have somehow present themselves as having achieved fiscal consolidation, what is happening to their fiscal efficiency? Are they more efficient? Right. Then we have to see, are they really spending money on the social sector? We got a lot of table to show that the states which are not, which are off the mark from the rule-based system, their spending on social sector is far more. Now, second part, future direction. Now, here, one cannot ignore that fiscal consolidation is essential. There has to be some rules, and otherwise, the efficiency in fiscal management will not be achieved. So, states will have to augment the resources. State will have to augment both the tax resources as well as non-tax resources, and they have to rein in control on the subsidies, and they have to also improve what the RBI calls it as fiscal forecast predictability. The reason is nowadays the dependence on the market borrowing is too high, and so much so the analysts would look forward to accuracy between the actuals or very good correspondence between the accounts and the budget estimates. To that extent, the budget estimates will have to be predictable. Now, coming to how many minutes? Another 4 5 minutes. 2 minutes. Okay. So these are the three aspects where one has to highlight. Now, if you are picking up some good lessons from some states like Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, yes, they have improved their own tax savings for whatever be the reasons. And if you look at Orissa, for instance, their non-tax revenue has gone up. That's big, and non-tax revenue primarily happens to be revenue coming from the minerals. And what Orissa government has done, unlike other states, is they have fixed the revenue from the minerals as a percentage of the production. That means it is based on the market value, as well as they also collect royalty. So these are the sub directions in which states can move. And the recent Supreme Court verdict provides a lot of power to the states to improve. So these are the two sources whereby the states can improve the revenue. Now coming to my last part, right? Where are we heading to? I might make few points here. Constitution has empowered center to levy major taxes, while states have higher spending responsibilities. There are reasons for it. State governments contribute, this is a rough estimate by Reserve Bank of India in 23, contributes to over 64% of the total government expenditure, but they collect only 37% of general government revenue. Now, which means where are they getting the money from? Obviously, they have to look up to the big brother. Now, how the big brother will be behaving? Now, under Article 280 of the Indian Constitution, the Finance Commission recommends transfer of resources to the from the center to the states, and the basic considerations of FC are need, equity, and efficiency. No doubt about it. FC formula has certain progressive element. Nobody will deny, because lately we are focusing more on the need, right? In order to reduce the both, in order to reduce the horizontal equities. So therefore, giving more money to the poorer states by some standard, it would ensure the states to provide more of social services and incur more of development expenditure, which is very good because the horizontal inequities will be reduced, no doubt about it. But where the problem lies, tax tax devolution recommended by Finance Commission under Article 270 considers shareable taxes and excludes cess and surcharge. This is happening after 2000, right? Now, two major development I can pick up from there. One is while plan grants being discontinued subsequent to the abolition of Planning Commission and as recommended by 14th Finance Commission, two members of the commission are present here. The state's share in central taxes are fixed at 42%, though its successors, that is 15th Finance Commission, has fixed it at 41%. There is a tendency for the state to collect more revenue in the form of cess and surcharge. And remember, the tax revenue coming from cess and surcharge has increased from 6.4% in 2011-12 to 17.7%, which means shareable resources is shrinking. Second point, with the amendment, 80th amendment to the Constitution in 2000, the corporation tax was brought under shareable resource. And 11th Finance Commission has used that one as part of their shareable resource. Now, what has happened? We are talking about fiscal stimulus. All of a sudden, finance minister says that corporate tax has been reduced or rationalized, whatever, right? We had written extensively about it. And corporate tax as percentage of the total shareable resource, it used to constitute, if I'm not wrong, about two-thirds. Now, all of a sudden, we just computed what will happen to the center's tax revenue because the finance minister reduced the corporation tax rate sometimes in 2019 September. Then we felt that from two-thirds, it comes down to half. So that means what happens to the base, that is shareable resources within the states, right? So one is state is ensuring that it has got more resources at its disposal through cess and surcharge. At the same time, whatever can contribute to the shareable resources, that also it actually reduces. In fact, her thing was the revenue for GOM because of this corporate tax reduction was 1.445 crore, 1.4 lakh crore, which is not a simple amount. If you see the cess collected on, education, health, kind of cess collected, we wouldn't actually come closer to the revenue that was forgone, right? So that means, and more importantly, when this kind of shareable resources are getting shrunk, okay, just last minute. Is there any consultative process? No, right? It's not happening. Second channel, I'm finishing, last paragraph. Second channel by which center transfer resources to the state is grants as recommended by the Finance Commission under Article 275. It primarily functions as a general grant. Now, third channel is the grant and loans from the center to state outside the recommendations of the FC, right? That is, you can broadly group it as statutory as opposed to non-statutory. Now, what is happening is non-statutory includes centrally sponsored schemes. What's happening now is, in the morning, we just heard from one presentation by Sumalada. She was saying that as percentage of the total expenditure, if statutory grant constitutes 2.7%, then non-statutory grants constitutes 18.7%. So the ratio is almost 1.8 to 9. So the stress point here, right, it is good, the center transfers some money, but then will all the states benefit out of it? No. So the stress point here is the center's grant to states is defining what constitutes, and in fact it says it is based on what constitutes national goals and priorities, right? And we know that local polity may not be in alignment with that of the center. Lack of consensus on defining what constitutes lack of national priorities will cause enormous fiscal stress on some states. We have seen that, whose local aspirations are fundamentally different from the national priorities as defined by the center without having any kind of consultative process. Under these circumstances, making the grants conditional or discretionary could lead to conflict rather than cooperation. Now, on the whole, we are talking about double engine. So sometimes I wonder, when we look at the states, this time when I was looking at RBI's latest publication, My mind was not like we know that there are states whom we consider as developed states, there are states whom we consider as underdeveloped states. Rather, my mind was going like this: double engine versus others, right? Which are following the pattern of double engine kind of government and which are otherwise, right? That's how we were looking at this. That means our mind, see, we are getting influenced by the political relationship rather than the economic relationship, which is driving the central transfers. I'll stop here. And with this kind of development, the wedge that we see around achieving cooperative federalism remains a distant future, distant dream. Thank you.
Dear friends, see, due to shortage of time, I am not repeating the points mentioned by the earlier speakers. I just want to make some observations. Today, I just want to speak something about the political economy of state finances. See, based on RBI state finance study of budget document and other data, what is the current situation of state finances in India? First is that during the fiscal year 22-23, 12 states have revenue deficits. That means they resort to borrowing for meeting their daily routine expenditure. See, some states like Andhra Pradesh, they borrow about 80% of their total borrowing is used for meeting the revenue deficit. Haryana 55%, Himachal Pradesh 51%, Punjab 77%, Rajasthan 62%, West Bengal 52%, Assam 42%. Thus, instead of euro, so what is happening? See, as per our fiscal framework, whatever we are borrowing, we should have to invest in capital expenditure and also development. But what is happening is that large share of borrowing is used for meeting the revenue deficit or for meeting the routine expenditure. This is one major trend that is taking place recently. Again, another thing is that high rate of gross fiscal deficit and borrowing is another aspect. In 10 states, the gross fiscal deficit as percentage of GDP was more than 4%. Again, in some states, witnessed substantial increase in expenditure on wages and salaries during the last 7 years. In states such as Chhattisgarh, Karnataka, MP, Rajasthan, Sikkim, the increase was more than 100% within a period of 7 years. In UP, the increase was about 218%. So the rapid increase in wages and salaries is distorting the state finances. Some states resort to off-budget borrowing. So, see, within the budget, they are borrowing everything, but still they are not in a position to meet the routine expenditure. So they resort to off-budget borrowing. Kerala is a state where you find that a lot of controversy is there relating to the off-budget borrowing. This is a very important political issue also. There is vast disparities in the level of economic development of states affecting the mobilization of own tax and also non-tax revenue. 8 states remain very backward as the share of rural population to total population was more than 75%. See, we have to classify the state into different categories, and in the case of 8 states, the percentage of rural population to total population is more than 75%. That they are very backward states. So in our fiscal analysis, we are not taking into consideration this aspect. There are a large number of states which are very backward, and they're very backward compared to the other states. I think even in our Fiscal Responsibility Act, there is no mention about this backwardness. Lot of disparities are there, a lot of this type of disparities exist. This we are not taking into consideration in examining the state finances. Again, recently the union government has taken a decision to switch over to from the national pension system to unified pension system. It is also creating a lot of additional burden to so many states. And we don't have any idea about how to manage this type of a situation. See, in the Indian federal setup, it is the duty of the state to manage the state finances within the fiscal federal framework of the country and following sound policies and fiscal practices. The union government should also follow state-friendly fiscal policies. But in reality, in majority of the states have been following fiscal policies and practices which are against the fiscal interest or fiscal stability of states. See, here I am coming to the political economy aspect. In some states, major decisions relating to state finances are taken not on economic or other consideration, but purely on political consideration. Some states are implementing populist benefit distribution schemes, cash distribution schemes, involving huge recurring financial burden to get political gains to win elections. Without taking into consideration the recurring financial burden, you are resorting to implementation of a lot of reckless populist distribution schemes which totally distort the state finances. Again, another is fiscal extravagance. Fiscal extravagance means in most of the states, policies to give undue benefits to all categories of vested interests. Private, in Kerala, you find that private aided educational institutions, public sector undertakings, autonomous bodies, retaining loss-making units, maintaining surplus government departments, so many things. It's a fiscal extravagance type of spending. I think compared to other states in Kerala, you can find this type of fiscal extravagant type of spending. See, I will just point out one example. See, you take the case of in Kerala, you see the ministers and MLAs, they are entitled reimbursement of medical reimbursement, unlimited. One MLA has claimed an amount of 1.8 crores for a medical reimbursement. See, even now we are following that type of policies here. One person, one MLA claimed an amount of 1.8 crores for a medical treatment. See, even now you have that type of fiscal extravagance type of policies are here. In Kerala, you can find, I can point out a large number of cases where you find that the precious money is being spent like these type of things, especially in Kerala. I don't know much about what is happening in other states. Again, see, the fiscal issues are emerging as important socioeconomic issues. See, the political considerations, assuming the most crucial factor in determining the fiscal decisions, that is taking place. Though the state governments are appointing committees to examine fiscal situation, pay revisions commissions, state finance commissions, etc., the state are not prepared to implement the recommendations of the commissions. I can very well say that Kerala is a state where the state is not prepared to implement most of the recommendations given by uh, public expenditure review committees or state finance commissions or pay revision commissions, and you are totally promoting the fiscal extravagant type of thing. So a state government will not accept most of the recommendation unless it suits to their political interest. See, if you closely analyze the fiscal decisions of the state government in Kerala, you can find that the state is not prepared to accept any major recommendation of a committee unless it is not suited to the political interest of the state. This type of a situation is prevailing. This is why I am arguing, sir, that political factors, political economy is a crucial factor in determining state finances. Here, earlier speakers, they used to say that everything is see on the basis of rationality, economic principle, this, that. That is not taking place in 2 minutes. So, happening. I will conclude my discussion on the basis of my own experience. I was the chairman of the Kerala Public Expenditure Review Committee for 3 years during the years 2012, 13, 14. After that, I was also the chairman of the State Finance Commission for another 1.5 years. What is exactly happening? How the government has accepted the recommendations? See, in our Public Expenditure Committee, one of our recommendation was, see, in Kerala, we are having a practice of revising salaries and pensions once in 5 years. All India level and in other states, you are having once in 10 years. So our recommendation was that the first one of the major recommendations was this. You change this practice. You switch over to once in 10-year revisions of salaries and pensions. Nobody was prepared to accept it. The finance minister was not prepared to accept it. The chief minister was not prepared to accept it. The opposition parties are not prepared to accept it. And the report was burned. And there was a lot of problem was there. This is happened in Kerala. You know what is the current situation in Kerala's finances? This is happened in 2012, now 2025. If you take the fiscal situation of the year 23-24, you can find that Kerala has been facing the unprecedented fiscal crisis, the worst fiscal crisis in the year 2023-24. The total amount of loans taken by the state government for one single year is more than 1 lakh crores. Out of that, 53,000 rupees were taken on the basis of taken on short-term loans. That is, I'll say that. The total loan taken was more than 1 lakh crore, 53,000 ways and means advance. The total number of ways and means advance taken in the year 23-24 was 225 times. The total number of times overdraft taken was 67 times in the year 2023-24 in Kerala. So, I am presenting the hypothesis that the political economy, political factor is becoming the crucial factor in determining the state finances in Kerala. Then I will also come to my experience as the chairman of the Finance Commission. See, we have given 3 reports. The Public Expenditure Committee has given 3 reports. And what is the result? The state government was not prepared to implement any of the recommendations. They consider these Public Expenditure Committee report as other committee reports are some committees which satisfy the normal bureaucratic procedure. That is the view taken by the state government for the 3 reports. Then coming to the State Finance Commission. As you know, State Finance Commission is a constitutional commission, and you have to implement the State Finance Commission. But what happened to the 5th State Finance Commission, in which I was the chairman? The commission report was not placed in the assembly for the first 2 years. The action taken report was not placed in the assembly for the first 2 years. Then in the second part, what happened was that we have given 133 recommendations and the government accepted 78 recommendations. And what happened was that except one or two recommendations, 3 or 4 recommendations, no recommendations were accepted by the state government. And a very interesting, I'm concluding, a very interesting thing was that the finance minister who was in charge of this during that time was an economist turned politician. The finance minister was an economist and politician at that time. And we are saying that Kerala is a state where it's a model of decentralization, this, that, etc. This is what exactly happened in Kerala. So when we discuss about these state finances, we have to take into account these hard realities. Thank you.
Now I request the chairs, speakers of the session back to the dais and open the floor for the discussion.
Thank you very much.
The discussion, after discussion, you can conclude.
Okay. Now, discussion, there is scope for discussion. I think we have hit the time limit. But if the speakers have anything to comment on each other's thing, please go ahead. And question answers, since the organizers are also offering us lunch, I suggest that you ask the tough questions to the speakers over lunch. So, do you have anything to ask each other? If you don't, then let me first start by saying I thank the organizers for inviting me here. But when I was sitting here, I realized that you have exposed India to a major concentration risk. Today, looking here, I thought that from 20 to the age of maybe 75 or even 80, all the public finance economists are here. Thank God, India is a strong country and Vasco da Gama cannot come here. But if you were to bombard this place, there would be no public finance left in India. But we are safe. Now, we have been offered a very rich fare on public finance, and I'm not going to take up all the issues. I'll just focus on two of them. The first is these issues about federal structure, fiscal stance, cess surcharge, GST, and so on. Now, let me first say that we have to be careful. We must recognize what has worked and what hasn't. Now, what has worked, some of you students may not have been born, but those who have lost their hair or their hair have turned gray, in our lifetime, we have seen the formidable Soviet Union breaking up. We have seen our neighbor Pakistan breaking up. We have seen Yugoslavia breaking up, Czechoslovakia breaking up. There are plenty of cases. Somehow, we wretched Indians, we haven't managed to break up the country. So something has worked in the federal structure. We must recognize that. And here, there are some troubling issues. Cess surcharge, it keeps coming up. Now, cess and surcharge are the powers of the sovereign to levy in extenuating circumstances. Now, you cannot take away that power. You cannot have COVID or a war, and you will say, no, the government doesn't have any power to have cess and surcharge. But should it become routine? Now, there comes the democratic culture.
I mean, there must be some sanctions. People must say, what are you doing? Why are you doing cess and surcharge year in and year out? But I don't think there can be any legal framework which says you cannot have cess and surcharge. You cannot have a legal system where the central government will be told, no, you have to share the cess and surcharge. So it's more a question of culture. If the people disapprove, then it will not happen. Second is the issue of taxes to GDP ratio. Now, Shurajit has asked this very important question that, and many of you have mentioned this taxes to GDP ratio. Now, I don't think there is much disagreement except for a few people, including my friend Surjit Bhalla, who think tax GDP ratio is very high in India. All of us agree that tax GDP ratio is low and we should increase it. Now, here is the question of what should we do and what can we do? Look at the history of income tax. We have had, during Mrs. Gandhi's regime, very high tax rate. That didn't mobilize too much money. We had wealth tax, we had estate duty. That also failed. Does it mean should we throw the baby with the bathwater? But we must find out why it didn't work. Where is the infirmity in our tax administration that despite the fact knowing that someone has got a lot of money, we cannot, I mean, the laws. So it's a more of nitty gritties rather than saying have more taxes. Just increasing tax rate will not do it. You need more deep thinking. Now, here I come to two issues which are related. We always suffer from nostalgia. Golden days were there. Now, this fiscal stimulus, fiscal deficit finance stimulus, we have tried it from 1947 to 1990. We tried a lot of fiscal stimulus. What was the Effect? If you're saying that before 1990 was the golden age of the Indian economy, we had persistent balance of payments problems. We had to run to the IMF for exceptional balance of payment support. After 1991, we haven't faced that. We haven't had to go with hat in hand to multilateral institutions for exceptional balance of payment support. Before 1990, we had persistent inflation problems, many periods, and even growth rates were not high. So, to have this nostalgia, let's go back to the past days of no fiscal consolidation, spend as much as you like. I don't think that's very much reasonable to argue. The same is the thing with GST. I remember Govind was there, many of us were on the sidelines, either in the government or in an IPF. Oh, there was so much hullabaloo about GST. What is happening to the states? States' powers are being taken away. But GST, let's accept, has been a grand success. In fact, the RBI report, State on State Finances, shows that GST, initial teething trouble was there. Not only GST is mobilizing revenues, but we are finding convergence because we have moved from the origin principle to the destination principle. So states which had a low tax to GDP ratio are getting more revenues than what they used to. Now, here I must congratulate, sitting here in God's own country, Kerala provides a gold standard for devolution to local bodies. Now, Professor Chelhaya, the founder director of NIPF, used to say that our enthusiasm for decentralization or devolution stops at our level. We want more powers from our boss. But when it comes to our subordinate, we don't want to delegate any more powers. Now, look at the states. How much money the state governments are giving to the local bodies? The money is coming mostly from finance commission grants. Now, they don't put their, my time is over. I know I'm the chairman, but still I must consult. Now, okay. So I'll take 5 minutes, madam. Is that accepted? 2 minutes only? You're very strict. Okay. Now, let me be telegraphic in my thing. I believe the time has come for fiscal consolidation. Why? We have faced two crises in the past. One was the global recession, Great Recession. The other was the COVID. Now, when do you fix your roof because it leaks? When the sun is shining. You can't have every year that you say, give a stimulus. There must be some years when you say, no, no, this is the time not to give a stimulus. But it seems it has become a habit that we say, stimulus, stimulus, let's give stimulus. But the issue is open. Surajit, I was very impressed by your point, and I don't have the answer. Maybe some of the experts have. That fiscal consolidation, why has private investment taken so long to revive? That was the expectation. There are other reasons, of course. The global economy is doing badly. And we have this phenomenon called Donald Trump now. So the Trump effect is also there. Now, let me finish by just making three. One issue is welfare measures. Now, we are a democracy, and I'm proud of it. Here, people will decide what the government should do. And as we go from a low income country to a low middle income country, we must change the way we look at the poor. Who is poor? The definition of the poor during my grandmother's days cannot remain the same. But what I have found from my ground level experience, the universal basics incomes doesn't work because so many people, if you want to give everyone money, then we don't have enough money. So targeting has to be there. But the Indian polity still hasn't found. I give income certificates on the basis of what the Sarpanch has given and what the BDO has given. I look at who I'm giving the income certificate to, and I understand that that cannot be the income. This family's monthly income cannot be 4,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees. So, targeting, we must find a better method of how do we target the poor. Second is too many schemes, which the former Cabinet Secretary Chandrasekhar was talking about. Now, too many schemes, inauguration takes place, and then you find a half finished bridge. There's something called interest during construction. A private businessman will be much more careful. Why do you start 5 bridges when you know there is not enough money to even complete 2? Why don't you just start 1 or 2 bridges and have the money so that the project will be completed on time? Third is outcomes. Now, outcomes, I'll give you an example. We have this afforestation scheme. Most governments will show you that so many trees have been planted, so much money has been spent. Do you know how many trees are alive? Now you have the drone technology. So you can actually take pictures and you can find out how many trees survived. So more emphasis on outcome. I'm grateful to the speakers, the issues that you have brought up. I think it should be a 3-day seminar for taking up all the issues and engaging with each other. But I thank you all on behalf of Professor Mandal and myself and the organizers for enriching our knowledge. Thank you very much. Please give a hand to this.
Thank you, sir. Now, due to the time constraint, we are only, yes, yeah, we are only able to take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. So now the floor is open.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm online. Can I please ask a question? I'm Adikeshan.
Please go ahead. Are you asking
Yeah.
to some one of them or all of them?
No, this is to the entire.
You can't ask questions to the chairman. Chairman are question proof. So ask the
No, yeah, my question is to the panel. Very interesting discussion and very diverse viewpoints have come. My question relates to the fiscal deficit issue and the state finances, which was the subject matter of today's discussion. On the whole, we have seen states sticking to the fiscal deficit target. My question is, we have had the union government um, doing fiscal deficit based budgeting of, fiscal deficit was about 9% 2020-21. And then from there it has come down. But even at the end of 2026, the targeted fiscal deficit is 4.5, which is 50% above the FRBM target. So does the panel believe that this has caused any negative macroeconomic impact? My hypothesis being that because at the union level, we crossed the target and ran up high deficits, we could have, budget sizes which will take care of expenditure of the government and also the increasing emphasis on infrastructure allocation, which has been 11 lakh 50,000 crore last year, 11 lakh 11,000 crore. So my question, to distill down it, what has been the macroeconomic negative impact, if at all there has been anything, on account of a higher than mandated fiscal deficit run successively by the union government for the past 5 or 6 years? Thank you.
any volunteers?
I think we should be solving all the problems today.
Okay, but let me tell you one thing.
Just let them pose the
I am
question.
in agreement with you insofar as the union government is concerned. The union government, you must practice what you preach. Because even if you look at the fiscal profligacy, I call it profligacy, that was not started by the states. The union government showed the way, and the state governments followed. And I believe, I have full faith in Indian polity. If the union government starts practicing what they preach, the states will follow. Anyone else?
So one supplementary only. My point actually has been slightly different. What I was saying was, normally the assumption is that if the government's fiscal deficit is higher and it is borrowing, it will crowd out private investment or funds for private capital. But I'm from State Bank, having retired, I have an advisory role. But I have seen that even this doesn't hold good. The banks are holding SLR or government securities 8 to 10% more than what is mandated, and it has not at all starved private capital or loans by private companies or private investors, despite the FD being much higher. So is there some theoretical weakness in the whole thing?
Shurojit among us here may have something to say. If not, then
Can I?
Yeah, Professor Govind Rao.
What?
Yes.
No, you don't know the counterfactual. The fact that there has been a much larger draw of household sector savings by the government, it could have reduced. I mean, if it did not do it, it could have reduced the interest rate. And if it had reduced the interest rate, there would have been much higher private investment. We don't know. There is no empirical evidence to say that. So on the basis of the fact that we did not adhere to the fiscal deficit, that doesn't mean that the economy would, sort of is doing very well because of that. Can I ask him so?
You want?
Yeah, no, in fact, when we are talking about state finances, you have to look at from whose perspective you are talking about. According to the first generation theories of federalism, macroeconomic stabilization and redistribution is predominantly a central function. And it is the allocation or provision of public services according to the preferences of the people is the function of the subnational governments. If that be the case, all the time we are focusing on deficit and deficit and deficit. And that is the function of the central government. And from the state's perspective, if you want to look at how the state finances have behaved, you should be looking at how much of what has been the amount of spending on basic services that have been spent. And in fact, there was a report on the fiscal health of the index of the state, health index, which is entirely on deficit, and that doesn't concern the states. And if the states are indulging in much greater deficit, the mistake goes to the union government. I mean, you have the FRBM Act, and if you have the FRBM Act, why are you allowing them to borrow more? The point simply is no. That's a second issue. The point simply is states as a whole have done very well, but individual state there are the problems. The problems have to be seen and then corrected there, rather than trying to say that. I want to say one thing on your global financial crisis and the government of India missing up the target. Don't blame the global financial crisis. Government of India missed the target because of the three major decisions taken in the 2008-9 budget. Low farm loan waiver, the pay commission recommendation, and the expansion of national rural employment guarantee to the entire country. Now, the question is, I'm not going into the question of right or wrong. The issue is that it is that which happened. Global financial crisis came later. I mean, that came in September. This was done much earlier. And then you put the blame on the global financial crisis. And there is one other thing that I wanted to say.
Come on. Yeah. Continue.
Now, this is somebody mentioned about very fast, that I think Dr. Musumdar mentioned about, 2007-8 becoming the peak for the tax GDP ratio. There is a reason. The reason is that in 2003, there was a Controller and Auditor General who made a recommendation that the companies and the individuals who are supposed to deduct the tax at source and file the return deducted the tax at source, didn't give it to the government. Government did not have, I mean, there was no way, and there was no information system. It was in that time that the tax information network was put in place. From 2004 to 2007-8, you will see that income tax revenue, particularly the corporation income tax, increased by 36% per year. And to tax GDP ratio increased by about 2.5%, 2.5 to 3% from 2004 to 2007. That was the peak. Thereafterwards, in fact, the NSDL was the one which was doing it. It covered city by city, covered the thing, and thereafterwards it stopped there.
Thank you, Govind. As usual, you can never disagree with Govind Rao. So thank you. You have been asking, sir, gentlemen.
Yeah. You see, I have a particular question to Deva Prasad Rath. See, you are the only one who mentioned about very interesting point of the quality of expenditure. So do you feel that the institutions and agencies which you have set up to look after the quality of expenditure has failed? If that is the case there, can you visualize some kind of new institutional setup to look into the quality of expenditure from the national to the local level? Thank you.
Surajit? The question was asked. No, yeah. Please go, come here. Now you take that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And what we stated here is that there was another question from online. Now, the point that RBI research has indicated is that quality of spending is very important, especially when you are in a crisis mitigation mode. Post this COVID, what we saw is that that was the time when the quality of expenditure really improved in terms of revenue expenditure capital outlay ratio. There are several ways in which we can measure quality of expenditure. And when I was working at RBI, this was a question assigned to us by the top management, that what is a good indicator of quality of expenditure. The thinking was that even revenue expenditure is important in a country like ours. It's not that just do capital outlay because of higher fiscal multiplier and then you will achieve everything. You will set up universities, hospitals, that is CO. But RE is required to give salary to the skilled persons. So what we saw from country evidences and academic literature is that this is one of the robust measures, especially in the context in which fiscal policy is now working. So if you have achieved better quality of expenditure, and what I was also mentioning is that we found out what is the threshold reco ratio. We are in that range now, especially during this post-COVID years. Then that really explains why the other macroeconomic variables are so well behaved, even though you have high deficit financing. You have low inflation. Normally, you say when deficit is high, your inflation should be high. But we are within the targeting framework, maybe few deviations here and there. But that is purely explainable in the global setting that we are working. One, your growth rates, your potential growth rate that we are talking about, that we are achieving. So what is important is that when you are spending your stimulus, better to put it in a way that quality of expenditure remains high and you are achieving that sweet spot, if I can call, threshold reco ratio. Now, coming to the private investment question, we did some work in Reserve Bank. What we saw is that what is the sweet spot for the corporate sector? From a level of say 20-21%, if you take the debt ratio, we saw that at a level of 26 or 27%, that would be the growth maximizing indicators. And the gap, if you say 20-21% now, till 26, 27, you have a 5% gap. So that is something which needs to close. Thank you.
On your question of quality of expenditure, again, I'm not talking as an economist, I'm talking as a ground level guy. Take Gram Sadak Yojana. Okay. Now, the people are becoming enlightened now. You take this must be happening in Kerala also. I hope the quality of expenditure is better. You build that concrete road next to the pond, but you don't give a guard wall. So during rains, that pond bank will subside, the concrete road will be hanging. Now the villagers know it. And when you are building that road, they will tell the contractor, your specification has this guard wall. Why haven't you built it? So, in a way, I believe you may say that it's a council in despair, but as the people improve, their education improves, their awareness improves, they will make us more accountable. Just as an MLA or a member of Legislative Assembly, I can't do whatever I want to. They will ask me questions. Why are you not doing this? Even primary schools, where attendance is a problem, teacher attendance, where primary health centers, where doctors' absence is a problem, where availability of medicine is a problem. The people are asking questions. I think it has to be a symbiotic relationship between the people and the policy and outcomes. Should we end it here? Because I don't think you'll get such a galaxy of people to answer your questions, but lunch is waiting and lunch shouldn't suffer. Thank you very much. Some of us have to chair sessions at 12 o'clock.
We extend our sincere gratitude to all who involved in this discussion. As a token of love and appreciation, please accept the mementos. Now I request Professor Sudipto Mandal to present memento to our distinguished speaker. I invite Professor C.P. Chandrasekhar to receive the memento. Thank you, sir. Now I welcome Dr. Deba Prasad Rath to receive the memento. Now I invite Professor Surjit Majumdar to receive the memento. Thank you, sir. I invite Dr. Dennis Rajkumar to receive the memento. Now I invite Professor Alvin Prakash to receive the memento. Thank you, sir. I now I invite now I invite Professor Bhanumurthy sir to come to the stage and give this mementos to the chairs of the session. I invite Professor Sudipto Mandal to receive the memento. Thank you, sir. I invite Dr. Ashok Lahari to receive the memento. Thank you, sir. Last but not the least, our deepest gratitude to all professors, scholars, students, and attendees for their active participation and thoughtful contributions to the session. With that, I thank you all once again and look forward to continue this dialogue in the upcoming sessions of the conference. Wishing you all a wonderful day. We invite you all for the lunch and it is arranged in the basement area. Thank you all.